Well, here we are. Dun dun dun. It is time for Joe Biden's long awaited executive orders regarding gun control. Um, and I have to say, if this is as bad as it gets, while it's not great, while it's worse than anything Obama did, worse than what Trump did, it's not that intimidating to me. Now, some of you might be saying, "Oh, come on, man. What do you mean it's not that? It's not that intimidating." Sure, it's just one. They take one little bite out of the Second Amendment slowly over time, just keep eroding it bit by bit and taking away more and more. First it was Obama with the well, I shouldn't say first, but in recent times, there's been lots and lots of erosions going back to the start of the country. Despite what Joe Biden says, no, the Second Amendment has pretty much been getting weaker and weaker as time goes on in America. From a legal perspective, we start out with the country with zero exceptions to the Second Amendment, and exceptions have been made. Infringements have been permitted as time has gone on. But that does not mean necessarily that the right to bear arms in and of itself, in spirit, is dying in America. I first started paying attention to the gun issue after Sandy Hook, and I have to say that in that time since Sandy Hook, I think that the Second Amendment has gained in strength in this country. I think that there used to be a reasonable fear that the government might one day round up everybody's guns and take them away. But as time has gone on over the past few years, it's become abundantly clear that this is the most polarizing issue in America. It is the issue in which the least amount of people can think of any kind of real compromise. Anyone who's passionate about this issue in any way, who gives a damn about it, is not willing to compromise. Either you want to take away all the guns, or you want to keep the guns. It's that simple. And because of that lack of an ability to compromise, there never really will be able to be any true, gun confiscation on a systematic basis in this country. What Joe Biden is doing today is going after a very small fragment of the gun market in this country. Now, while I think that it's totally unconstitutional, of course, just like all gun control, and totally illegal in a statutory sense, Joe Biden is by executive order banning ghost guns, as the left, sort of started calling them, and then the right sort of embraced. And you have groups like Defense Distributed Manufacturing, machines that they call the Ghost Gunner for manufacturing ghost guns. And ghost guns are a great thing. I don't want to see them go away. It's something that I hope, an executive order that I hope would be struck down in the courts. But at the end of the day, most people are not buying 80% lowers and milling their own receiver and then building their own gun that way. And frankly, the people who were doing that for security purposes, because they wanted a totally untraceable gun, which is right. I mean, if it were convenient, I would want every gun to be untraceable that I own. Not that I own any guns, of course. I would never admit to that, even if it were true. But obviously, you don't want the government to know who has the guns. And of course, part of the right to keep and bear arms is the right to manufacture your own arms. And just because there are certain companies that make it easier to manufacture your own gun from scratch doesn't make it any less of your right, which is why this whole idea that, we're going to reclassify 80% lowers as firearms. That's essentially what Joe Biden is looking for the ATF to do here. Now, the only reason why 80% lowers exist is because the ATF approved them. Somebody went to the ATF and they asked them, "Hey, is this a firearm?" And they said, "Nope, that's just a piece of metal." And so somebody said, "Great, I'm going to sell this as not a firearm." And so they did. So I mean, this is like Biden getting mad at the ATF, essentially. And so what's going to happen next if somebody says, if the ATF says, no, that's not 80% of a firearm, that's 100% of a firearm. or rather saying 80%, being 80% complete, it's still considered a firearm. It doesn't have to be 100% complete. Then somebody's going to make a 50% lower. I mean, at some point, you're going to get just blocks of aluminum with a jig, and somebody's going to mill it completely from scratch, and it's not going to look good. It's not going to look like an AR lower, but it might function, and people will still do it. But I guess part of this, what Biden's looking to do, is to try and have the jigs and the equipment that is sold, by companies to try and, mill 80% lowers. They're going to try and serialize that and declare them firearms. I don't know how they do that. I mean, that would be a whole mess in and of itself. But look at the bigger picture here. Yes, it's terrible that they're doing that, but why are they doing this? They're doing this to try and throw some red meat to the gun grabbers on the left, because they know that they can't get anything broader done, because this is such a small minority of gun owners that they know that they won't be able to put up a fight. And that, yes, this will get fought out in the courts, and it probably will get declared unconstitutional at some point, but they need to give the left something, because they're not going to get anything through Congress. And of course, Joe Biden's coming out here and saying, I have a pen and a phone, just kind of like Obama, and Congress needs to do stuff, but, I have to act, even if Congress won't. If Biden really could pass a major gun control bill, and sign that into law, or if he could sign an executive order confiscating guns, they do that. But they just can't. This is too rigid of an issue. They don't have the power. That's what this is. This is Biden trying to exercise the maximum amount of power he can. And even in this case, it's not entirely clear that he'll be able to get away with it. But if you look at this in the context of the entirety of guns in America, this is a drop in the bucket that they're trying to illegally infringe upon. Okay, so let this be your white pill for the day. This is an act of desperation, I think. And that's not just wishful thinking. I mean, look at it. Biden has a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. He can't get this done. And a big reason for that is that old Joe Manchin, from the last Democrat standing in West Virginia, wants to run for governor of West Virginia. And West Virginia people don't want any part in Biden's gun grabbing. So Joe Manchin knows that if he wants to have a political future in the very pro-gun state of West Virginia, he's going to have to defend the Second Amendment till his dying breath. And so long as that's the case, the Democrats are not going to be able to break the filibuster to pass any kind of gun grab. And so, yes, they're going to try and nibble away at the Second Amendment as much as they can through the executive branch and do terrible things. Like, they're also going to try and ban pistol braces now. And the ATF has gone back and forth on this issue. And they were doing so under Trump. At first, they said, no, pistol braces are fine. And then they said, well, no, it becomes a short-barreled rifle if you put it to your shoulder and use it as a stock instead of an arm brace. And then they said, well, it's fine again. I mean, they've been all over the place on this issue. Again, is this legal? Under any fair interpretation of the law? No. But again, these are the kind of little games that the ATF likes to play to screw with people. I mean, the ATF are not good. They're not good Americans. If you work for the ATF, and you should be ashamed of yourself. And if you're not, you're a bad person. It's that simple. I mean, the ATF is a terrorist organization. I mean, you go back to the anniversary of Waco, and I think I make a plenty decent case as to why that is. So you can't look at the ATF being tyrannical scumbags and say, oh no, it's the end of America, the Second Amendment is dead, because that's just not the case. The ATF preys on the weak because they're a bunch of bullies, because they're bottom feeders, because they're the scum of the earth. They go after, the Branch Davidians and that family up on Ruby Ridge. Or, wait, was it the ATF that went after Ruby Ridge? I can't remember now the details. But anyway, yeah, the bad guys are always looking for new ways to screw over good people. That's what they do. That's how they make a living. But thankfully, their power is limited. And I mean that in an absolute sense, in a practical sense, not in necessarily a constitutional sense, because of course constitutionally there should be no ATF. The federal government, there's nothing in the Constitution about messing around with people because they have tobacco or alcohol or firearms. You have every right to do whatever you want with alcohol, tobacco, or firearms under the Constitution. Now, the worst thing to come out of today, in terms of impacting the most amount of people, is Biden's big push for red flag laws. Which, by the way, thank you, David French, for giving Joe Biden that idea. I'm sure you must be so proud of yourself, you and the National Review. I can't. There's plenty of people who have made the case as to why the National Review is a terrible publication, far better than I. But I mean, they're rotten to the core, going back to the very beginning when they were founded by a CIA operative to essentially infiltrate and destroy the conservative movement. Which congratulations, CIA, you did that. Your man Buckley was a real pro at that. Two books on the topic would be, if you're interested, Believe, The Betrayal of the American Right by Murray Rothbard, and Reclaiming the American Right by Justin Raimondo. I believe those would. I know that Rothbard's does, but I believe also Raimondo covers this topic. But anyway, didn't mean to get sidetracked there. Red flag laws. What's Joe Biden going to do on it? Well, first of all, he said to Congress, hey, you should pass a red flag law. Good luck. You want to pass a thing that says essentially that you can have your Second Amendment rights stripped and have your guns taken away just because you're denounced by a known patriot? Which, for those of you who don't get the reference, that is during the Reign of Terror in France, you could be sent to the guillotine only based on the denunciation of yourself by a known patriot. In this case, however, the red flag laws apply to give family members and law enforcement the ability to point at someone and say, ha, that person shouldn't have their Second Amendment rights. Take away all their guns. And then they go and take away their guns first, and then they send them to court, and you have to fight in court to get your guns back. It is a horrible, horrible idea when it comes to anything. I mean, in law, to take away someone's rights and then, give them due process second. And I mean, it's like it's basically Minority Report stuff. It's saying, I bet that person will commit a crime. Now you have to go to court and prove that you're not a bad person. And so, whoop-de-doo. Democrat president supports red flag laws. Every Democrat president, I'd imagine, once the red flag law idea was invented by David French, every Democrat, obviously, would jump on board with that. Again, thank you, David French. And so all the White House is going to do, I guess, is draft a sort of a template legislation that can be used by various states to pass their own red flag laws. Well, if you're in a state that wasn't going to pass a red flag law to begin with, this makes no difference to you, because your state is going to say, go jump in a lake, Mr. Biden. So again, nothing came out of today. All this was pretty much was talk, other than what they're talking about, again, unconstitutionally banning so-called ghost guns. Well, I'm not surprised that they're going to do that. They're going to nibble around the edges of this sort of thing, that this is not a threat to the core of the Second Amendment. This is not the jackbooted Gestapo coming down your block, going house to house, kicking in doors, looking for guns. This is sort of the gun grabbers grasping at straws and just stealing whatever they can, stealing whatever liberties they can away from the American people. And whatever little rights they strip away from us now will not be gone forever, because the U.S. federal government is really in the twilight of its life. Much like Joe Biden, I made a video discussing sort of the analogy between the decline and fall of Joe Biden and the decline and fall of the American empire. Washington is heavily indebted. There's serious financial problems. I don't think that the federal government will really be able to make it through the next financial crisis intact. I think that we're going to see some major shakeups, and therefore, in the medium term, I would say the short term, but the medium to long term, the federal government is not going to be around and be exerting influence over our lives. It might exist, in name, kind of in the same, kind of the idea of who are those guys in in Fallout? Well, I can't remember, but I mean, there were these guys who marched around and called themselves the United States government, and they had a president, and his name was John Henry Eaton, I think, or something. But nobody, in the game story, people didn't really take him too seriously. Sure, there were some people who thought, that's my president, that's USA, but it didn't really mean much. And that's what happens, is that a state will lose if a big powerful state loses its power. And starts to lose its grip, you might have some kind of like government in exile type of thing after the bankruptcy of the federal government, or there might be something that props up to replace it, but it will, kind of like the Commonwealth of Independent States that very temporarily replaced the Soviet Union before that was completely dissolved and turned into nothing. The old legal code of the Soviet Union and things, it just sort of went poof. It was gone, and then new systems had to be built to replace it. I think that the collapse of the Soviet Union will be an interesting analog, and the same with probably Yugoslavia. Hopefully, we'll look more like the Soviet Union and less like Yugoslavia, and that there will be a peaceful transition to the new post-Washington system of government here. But I think it's safe to say at this point that if they really did try any drastic gun-grabbing measures, that would only accelerate the decline of the regime in Washington, rather than establish it on a more sound footing. So overall, I'm remaining optimistic as far as the future is concerned, and I think you should as well.